Hey new bodies, I'm back with episode number 24, and this one is going to be different from any of the ones we've done before. This is a little quick take on recipe guidance or food guidance. So if you follow me on Twitter at @newbody, you'll notice that I throw out photos and ideas for different easy food ideas for something flavorful, because you can eat healthy and still have all the taste and fun in your diet. I also have posted a number of different recipes on my blog, including our great optional chili recipe that you can get at newbodies/chili. But I wanted to share a really common one you'll hear sort of like health gurus talking about, and that's kale chips. Now, it might sound to you like it's super hippie or way too sort of like healthy and green for you, but actually you might be surprised to find that they are actually incredibly tasty. You can really flavor them up, and they're super healthy for you and light and crispy and fun to eat, just like a potato chip would be. Obviously, they're not potato chips. They don't taste the same as potato chips, and I'm not trying to say that you're going to eat these and be like, wow, it's completely the same thing. But they're healthy, they're enjoyable, they're really enjoyable, they're easy to make, and they're still light and crispy, and I mean, it sounds silly, but fun to eat. That kind of matters, you know? You want to be able to be healthy, but still enjoy your life and not feel like eating is a chore or a prison. So, I don't have live video footage of me making kale chips because it might be a little bit boring, but I'm going to talk through it real quickly, and I will flash some photos through that show you the prep, which is really, really simple. Now, there's a few different kinds of kale, and I've experimented with the different kinds in making chips, and actually someone at checkout who worked at Whole Foods gave me this tip when she saw the kale I was buying. She said that the best chips she's made has been with lacinato kale, also called dinosaur kale. And the difference between this and the typical, more traditional green kale is instead of being like kind of frilly and wavy and very leafy, the leaves are really flat. They have a little like more leathery texture to them, and they cook up a little bit better when you're making chips. So through experimentation, I definitely would agree with her. And so that's the recipe that I'm telling you about now. You can make this with really any kind of kale, including baby kale. So there are a number of ways you can get baby kale that basically it's ready to go. You don't have any prep to do other than just washing it and seasoning it. But for this recipe, we're going to use the full-on, they don't call it adult kale, but versus baby kale, I guess you could call it adult kale. So lacinato or dinosaur kale. And what you're going to do first is rinse the kale, rinse it really thoroughly. Do try to get organic kale if you can. You want to remove pesticides and other contaminants, fertilizers from your life as much as possible, and this is an easy way to do it. So do rinse that kale, get the dirt off of it. It's really helpful if you actually like wash your hand over each leaf as you're going, you get in the water on it. And the key thing with kale, other than baby kale, is you're going to want to remove the spine that runs down the middle of the leaf. Now that's the same with lacinato or the more traditional green kale or any other variety of kale out there. You can eat the spine, but it's tough, it's not as enjoyable, and it's really going to break the light crispiness of the kale chip and kind of, I wouldn't want to say spoil the experience, but definitely take away from the fun lightness that munching on kale chips can bring. I would say you can buy some really great kale chips already prepared, already seasoned, but what I've found is they're kind of heavy-handed, so they're usually a little bit thicker. The seasoning is really put on strong, and I just think it's unnecessary. Kale chips are not hard to make, and I find they're even more enjoyable when you make them yourself. So in total, it's only about a 20-25 minute recipe, including the roughly 20 minutes of cook time. The real manual labor here, the only real work, is just to get that spine off of the kale. So we cut the spine out from each piece of kale, and then with the dinosaur kale, you're left with these strips, basically one half of each piece of the leaf, so you get two halves per total leaf once you take the spine out. We've got our kale all cleaned. Basically, you just need it to dry off, so you can either set it aside for an hour or two in a strainer, maybe shake it every now and then, which is what I tend to do, or you could take a paper towel or a clean cloth and just dry them off. It's not incredibly necessary, you just don't want them to be dripping wet. You really do want the bulk of the water off them. A little bit of dampness or moisture, it's okay. If you're going to set them aside, sort of move them about every now and then to make sure that you're aerating them, and any water that might be trapped on one level, that leaf gets a chance to shift its position and drop the water off. That's really crucial to make sure that they do dry out a bit. And then what I do is I take about 1 to 2, maybe 1.5 cups of olive oil, You could also use avocado oil if you like that, or if you can afford it and have access to it, macadamia nut oil is fantastic. So we use olive oil, and again, I'm looking for organic olive oil. And for this recipe, it's basically just sea salt and garlic. So you can take 2, 3, 4, as much as you want really, cloves of garlic, crush them. You can chop them up, you can put them in a garlic press. That's what I did here. You can really do it any way you want. Crush that right into the olive oil. And then put in as much or as little sea salt as you would like. Again, you'll notice I don't recommend anyone ever use table salt. I always say sea salt. Himalayan salt, even better if you can get that. It's really flavorful and much healthier for you. So putting in some sea salt, I put in probably, I'd say maybe 1.5 teaspoons. But again, it's to your preference. You can always add more later when you're going to eat them. You can never take any out, so just be mindful of that. So you put that all into the oil and you mix it up. Ideally, if you could make that even before you start taking the spines out, then the flavor from the garlic will really start to permeate into the oil and make it even more flavorful. So that's actually the way that I would recommend doing it, is start off by mixing up your oil. Now here's where you can get fun. You can put cayenne pepper in your oil, which I definitely would like to do. My wife doesn't like them as spicy, so I don't do that when I'm making them for her, but cayenne goes really well here. You could put ginger in it, give it a nice light flavor. You could put sesame oil instead of olive oil, maybe some sesame seeds or crush up sesame seeds to get a sort of Asian taste to it. You really, you can go with whatever you like here. You can put turmeric in, incredibly healthy for you. It's got a lot of health benefits. You could throw some turmeric in. But the point is, much like with my optional chili recipe, the options are yours. So go with the flavor you like. You'll see for sale in the stores things like Parmesan kale chips, so you could throw some Parmesan cheese in there. I'd like to avoid adding cheese to my diet, but here it's a very simple garlic, olive oil, sea salt combination that works beautifully. So we mix up the oil, we've got that ready to go, we've got our kale leaves ready to go. You basically throw those kale leaves onto the tray and take your oil and seasoning, in this case garlic and sea salt mixture, drizzle it over some of the kale, stop the when you get about halfway and just sort of knead it through the kale. So moving the kale leaves around, making sure you're smearing it around so that both sides of those leaves are getting covered. And then go ahead and pour the rest of it on and do the same thing again. You want to have a nice even coverage throughout the whole mix of kale. If you have a lot of kale, you might want to use 2 trays. The more spread out it is, the more likely it will crisp up. So just be mindful of that. If you have things stacked on top of each other, it's harder for it to crisp. So stick it in an oven that has been preheated to 350 degrees. And I set a timer for 20 minutes, but the reality is I start checking after about 10 minutes. Ideally, around 15 minutes, you're probably going to take it out, but 15 to 20, depending on your oven, that's the range that you're going to see it in. So maybe set the timer a little early. Much better to be able to give it an extra minute than to realize you burned the whole batch and you got to throw them out. And you'll see that they've cooked to different levels of crispiness. So some parts of it, maybe around the edges or where you didn't pile kale up as high, will be maybe a little bit more brown, a little crispier, and some of the other parts might be greener. But you're going to notice that pretty much consistently after you pass 15 minutes, maybe 16, 17, 18 minutes, the pieces are all light, crispy, and they've got that great flavor that you put in them. So I will leave you with that. A super healthy, super simple, and really tasty and fun treat, literally for your whole family, that you can experiment with, get more flavor in, different flavors, make them a number of different ways. You can try the green kale instead of the lacinato to get a different texture, a different consistency, a different shape. Really, do whatever you want with them, but it's easy, light, fun, and healthy, and a great way to enlighten your body. So I'll leave you with that and this light, crispy sound to take us out.